Thank you so much for having me. So I'm super excited to talk about this topic. It's a passion of mine, credit and debt. So I look forward to doing so. What I'm going to do is I put the video on in the beginning so you can see who I am and get a little visual. And then I'm going to turn the video off so it's not distracting to you while we go through the slides. There's always a lot of information. So if there's anything that I miss or there's a question about anything, please don't hesitate to reach out. All of my contact information from all my social media handles will be at the end of the presentation. And I'm happy to speak to anybody about anything. And hopefully you get a lot out of this. So with that said, I'm going to turn my video off. I'll come back at the end and we'll talk from there. All right. So with that said, welcome. This webinar is about how to build your credit when you're unemployed. I want to use the term unemployed a little bit loosely because it could include underemployed, it could include temporarily unemployed, it could include just a change in your circumstances. So unemployed we're going to use as a little bit of a broad terminology here. So I am Leslie Tayne, and I am the founder of the Tayne Law Group. My law firm is headquartered in Melville, New York on Long Island. We normally have other offices, including our Manhattan office and Westchester and others out of state. However, under the circumstances, we're working exclusively out of the Melville office. We are all back and working, thankfully, and everybody's super happy about that. And we are busier than ever. So it's a unique time, certainly, to be in the debt resolution industry. So I've been in this industry for a very long time, over 20 years. I started out as an in-house counsel to a national debt company. I have seen all kinds of debt, from everything you can possibly imagine and every reason why somebody might have debt. We are an absolute judgment-free zone. Debt happens. It's part of life. That's why I wrote the book, Life and Debt. And from my perspective as a debt solutions attorney, I am generally not a preacher of a debt-free lifestyle. It really is one in which I believe that debt it can be positive, it can work for you, and as long as you make it work and you understand it, it actually can provide some really great benefits to your lifestyle. So the majority of my practice really is in debt resolution and alternatives to bankruptcy. I am considered an expert in credit and debt, although under my legal title as an attorney, I'm not allowed to call myself an expert, but I certainly am for the purposes of the media. And as part of my introduction, I am normally featured in a lot of different programs about credit and debt. So if you put into a search engine a topic, you'll probably come up with an article or something that I have been involved with. So today, with all of my expertise and my background, we have a number of objectives. I'm going to be discussing some credit building options, applying for credit while you're unemployed. And again, please use that term super loosely, and it may apply to you differently than somebody else. And avoiding unmanageable debt and just generally managing your debt. So with that, we'll get started. This year is kind of an unusual year. There's no doubt that the record number of unemployment and the reasons for unemployment have been super challenging, and the unknown in the future is challenging. So while you might be employed now, there is a chance that coming into the new year, you might find yourself on a different side of the table. So with that, some of the preparation really would be helpful, and the knowledge and understanding of how to manage your credit and debt now will be tools that you can place into your toolbox that will carry you through all different kinds of circumstances into the future. And what I mean by that is that some of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today will be useful for you today and going forward. It's never too soon, in my opinion, to prepare for unforeseen circumstances. And certainly this year was a doozy. In all the years that I've been doing this and practicing in this area, I have helped people through the financial impact of 9/11, the financial impact of hurricanes and other natural disasters, and certainly through the 2007 and 8 and 9 financial crisis. So this one will be one for my books as well. The financial impact of what's gone on and going on is we're not even at the tip of the iceberg here. And it's my opinion that this will probably continue, and the impact from this financially will probably continue for a good 3 to 5 years, if not longer depending on the industry you're in and how well you have been prepared through this process. So with that, you do have options to build your credit when you're unemployed. And one great option that I want to bring up, and we're going to talk about a few different ones, is a secured credit card. People ask me all the time about the secured credit card and how to really build their credit. And the secured credit card is a good way to do that if you have no history of credit. So it will bring about you an opportunity to build your credit with the secured credit card kind of in as little as 1 month. So it's a fast moving credit building option. But it could actually take many months or even years to build a consistently good and excellent credit score. So what does that really mean? That means that once you take the secured card, it gets reported on your credit. However, just because it's reported on your credit doesn't mean that it's changing the score immediately or changing the score or creating a history that is going to be impactful. The history, like in and of itself, the definition of history, takes time. So putting it on there will get on quickly and give you an opportunity to start that process. But here's how to use a secured credit card to actually build your credit. You need to choose the right secured card. You need to pay the deposit quickly. So a secured credit card works where you put money onto a particular card, let's say $500. So pay that quickly. Use the card, but use it wisely. Make sure you're careful about the purchases that you use. Pay it on time and pay it in full. Monitor your credit score, and then at some point you're going to want to upgrade to a more of an unsecured credit card. So store credit cards are another option for building your credit. They're super easy to get because many of them will give credit to those who have bad credit. They do report your balance and payment information to the major bureaus, and the 3 bureaus are Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax, just like any other credit card would. This means as long as you make your payments on time, your store credit card will add to your credit card's positive credit history, which can improve your credit score. So like I said, they're generally easier to get, and they will approve you if you have bad credit. And clearly the most common ones are ones like from Target or Walmart. And you might want to consider opening one at a store where you typically buy your essentials. So, if you open one at a store that you don't go to and you're not going to use the card, then it's just a card sitting idly. The point of opening a store card, if you're using it for credit building purposes, is to use the card. Now, don't go maxing the card out or using it as an opportunity to use the card a lot. You go in for your essentials, and you, instead of using another credit card or another purchase option like cash, you might use this as the option to make your essential purchases. Be very careful. Those stores in particular make it super easy to buy. I often find when I go into those stores, I feel like my brain gets sucked out of my head because I walk in and I look around and I get visually stimulated, and I say to myself, why am I here again? And because I do that, I realize that I need to either send somebody else to go get those items, or I need to make a list. So if you make a list or you send somebody else to purchase those items for you, you can manage your debt more effectively. This means you won't be consumed with impulse purchases, and instead of spending $50, you spent $150. So just keep that in mind when it comes to those store cards. You can use gas credit cards also for the same purposes, and just be aware that retail cards in general carry much higher interest rates. Those interest rates doesn't matter if you pay them, you're not going to get a better interest rate on them, but you will get more credit and more available credit, which gives you an opportunity to spend more or think you can spend more. You can say no, just so you know, to additional credit. So if one of your credit card companies comes along and says, we love you because you've paid everything off, or you keep a very low utilization rate, we'd like to offer you more credit, it's okay to say no. So there's many times it doesn't make sense to carry large available balances or large available credit in these store cards when you're really only using them for a little bit of money a month. So just keep that in mind. Obviously, you want to keep the utilization down, and we're going to talk about utilization a little bit later, but again, remember that you can say no. Note too that another credit building option is that you can actually go to your bank and ask for what's called a secured loan. If you have money, let's say in a credit union, a savings account, you can go to that credit union and ask the credit union if they would lend against the money in the bank, using the money in the bank as collateral. That would be reported and another source of credit building. So two other types of credit building options that are really important to touch on and know about. One is called an authorized user, and one is a cosigner. And when I say you can ask a trusted, loved one to add as the, be an authorized user, I say that, and I would like to repeat that, a trusted, loved one. So that means that you really trust this person, that you care about this person and have a very deep, long-lasting relationship with them, and that this is somebody that you'll have an ongoing relationship with and an understanding with. And the reason why that's the case is because their information, as an authorized user, you are basically given a card from somebody else. You don't actually have to possess that card, in fact, to be an authorized user. But that authorized user, the person who is taking out, who has the main card, their credit and their credit history is now going to impact you. So when I use the word trusted, I mean that you want to work with somebody, or you want to ask somebody who has a good credit history, pays their bills on time, and somebody that is financially responsible. And I stopped and hesitated with that word because it's important when you're making relationships based on finances, or you're creating relationships, you're building relationships where finances are involved, that you can trust this person and they are financially responsible. So like I said, you don't even have to use or even possess that particular credit card at all from the benefits of being an authorized user. With an authorized user, you can be added so that the card's payment history gets placed on your credit files. So again, having somebody who has a long credit history of paying on time is somebody that you'll want to work with for that particular purpose. Make sure that both parties are aware of the responsibilities always. Don't just go into it blindly. I am a big fan, even if you're super close, of writing things down because somebody tends to forget. And make sure the person you're asking has, like I said, good credit habits. Being an authorized user on someone's card doesn't have to, who doesn't have good credit habits can actually hurt you. So ideally, if you want to build your credit, you want to do a few things. You want to pay your bills on time. You want to get credit for making other types of debts, other payments. So for example, you can get credit for making utility and cell phone payments on time. There's actually something called rent reporting. So if you're renting right now, you can have your rent reported, assuming you pay on time and regularly. And Experian Boost has a process that can help as well. You can pay off your debts and keep low balances on your credit cards and other revolving credit. So as you start to build your credit, keep in mind that, and while you're in a position where you are currently unemployed, or your employment situation is questionable, you definitely want to pay your bills on time, and you definitely want to keep your credit utilization and the use of those cards to a minimum. You definitely don't want to be closing any credit at this point in time because you might need to use that credit in the future. Keep in mind, though, if you damage your credit under the circumstances, that when the banks do their new risk assessments after COVID, after they've gone through their financials, they could be adjusting their risk tolerance, which means that they could reduce credit lines, close credit lines, reduce your available balances. So be aware now that if you were unemployed, or you're going to potentially be unemployed, or you're going to have a loss of income for whatever reason in the near months, and I'm saying within the next 6 to 12 months, that you want to be very aware of how you're managing those credit cards and things like that. So applying for credit while unemployed. You can apply for credit while you're unemployed. The actual question on the applications is not about whether you're working. The question is about reported income. So reported income can include your Social Security benefits, disability payments, alimony, child support, income from freelance or side jobs, inconsistent work, investments, household income. If you have a spouse that's married, clearly your spouse would be married. But if you have a spouse that's earning income and you're not, you can still apply and use household income as a way to apply for a credit card. So managing your credit. We touched a little bit about this when I talked about your payment history and your utilization ratio. So I want to talk a little bit about this because it's super important to be aware of how and what factors make up your actual credit history. So FICO score is just one type of scoring model, Remember, there are different scoring models. There's a scoring model for houses, for cars. FICO is one type of scoring model through one of the credit bureaus, and there is another scoring model as well. But FICO is pretty popular, and that's the one that you very often see on your credit card statements. That may or may not be accurate with your actual credit score. So keep in mind that you'll have 3 scores, and those scores will come from each of the 3 credit bureaus. And the reason why you have 3 different scores is because not every creditor reports onto each of the credit bureaus. One may report to Experian and TransUnion and not Equifax, or they can report to one or all 3. There's no legal requirement for them to report to all 3 bureaus. That's why you get a discrepancy in your credit scores. So just be aware of that. When you're applying for loans and things, very often they're going to use a medium credit score. So you want to be aware of all 3 scores. Again, FICO is just one type of scoring model. So when we look at this chart, what do we see? We see a payment history that makes up about 35% of the score, followed by amounts owed, which is the total amount that you owe at 30%. The length of your credit history, how long you've had credit, is 15%, and new credit at 10%. Finally, the remaining 10% is calculated for a consumer's credit mix. What that means is your mix between secured, unsecured, cars, houses, credit cards, things like that. If it's disproportionate, where you have 27 credit cards, that's not going to be good for your credit score. So even though you're offered credit, that doesn't mean you have to accept it. So I'm an 80s child, and so I wasn't born in the 80s, but I grew up in the 80s. And so just say no was a very big and popular phrase that came from Nancy Reagan, and it really had to do with drugs. But I've carried it into my adulthood and into my practice, and I often say, just say no. You don't have to accept new credit. And in some cases, you don't want to accept new credit. Yes, you might get offers in the mail, and if you normally get offers in the mail, you've noticed that that has slowed down and almost stopped. That's because of the pandemic, and that's because many creditors are not going to be offering credit the same way. So if you have credit, be careful with the credit that you have and preserve it. But again, knowing this model and kind of keeping this chart in your mind, this pie chart, so you know exactly how your credit is impacted, will assist you in understanding what factors go into determining your credit. And when you're unemployed, you really do want to work hard to keep your credit score up. So again, if you're anticipating unemployment or there's going to be a change in income in your household, be aware of what ways you can reduce these numbers in order to keep your credit score high. So making on-time payments. I really can't stress enough how much making on-time payments counts. If you don't make on-time payments, if you ever have to ask a creditor for a favor, that not making on-time payments will absolutely go against you. And that includes the IRS, your state taxes. We have dealt with clients where we called up and said we'd like to negotiate, and what is normally negotiable becomes unnegotiable or not negotiable when you don't make your payments on time. You just don't have the credibility with your creditor. So, and credibility is key. It's one of those things where I often tell clients, we don't just call up creditors and make up any kind of story and tell them that you've had hardships and otherwise that you don't, because they have ways of checking the credibility of your statements. And if they find that you're not credible, you will be flagged as such. And then when you need a favor from them, like you want to waive a late fee, they just won't give it to you. So making your payments on time helps with your credibility factor. So make your payments on time. You can set up automatic payments every single month for the minimum payment. And I want to stress that if you're unemployed or you're in a circumstance where your income has been seriously compromised, it's okay to make minimum payments. You're not a bad person. It's okay to have debt, and it's okay to make minimum payments. Really try to make them on time. At some point, your situation will change. That is the one guarantee that I always tell my clients. There's a few things I can guarantee. One of them is that your circumstances is going to change. This is not going to be forever. We're going to come out of this. We're going to survive. We're going to thrive, and we're going to make it to the other side of this insanity. And so with that, you want to be prepared for that. And it's okay if during this situation, during this pandemic, during this crisis, during difficult times in your life, that you only make the minimum payment. At least you're making the payment. I'm a glass is half full kind of lady, and I try to be very thankful for the things that come my way. And I would say that I would be thankful that I could at least make the minimum payments and that I have the option to make minimum payments. So those are some positive ways to look at your circumstances. Now, Reducing your credit utilization. Let me explain what credit utilization is. It means how much you're spending on a particular card. So if you have $1,000 available credit, then you use $800 of it, you've used 80%. That's not good. You want to be in the opposite. You want to use about 20% or less of the card's available credit. And you might be thinking to yourself, that's just so wrong because they've given me all the credit, so why shouldn't I be able to use it? So yes, you can use it, but be prepared to pay it off. So don't carry a balance where your utilization is more than 20 or 30%. So how do you do that? You have to budget. It's the big old dirty word of budgeting. You need to be aware of what you can spend and how much you have available to spend. So if you spend that $1,000, yes, your credit score will come down. If you make a payment to that and you make a $500 payment, your credit score will come up a little bit. If you make the minimum payment, your credit score will stay lower because you have utilized all of the available credit, and therefore your credit utilization score is low, or is high, I'm sorry, and that means that your credit score is just not going to be there. If you're anticipating or you're in the circumstances where your income is compromised again, don't max out your cards. Because if you max out your cards, or try not to max out your cards, because if you do so, you won't have available credit to utilize if you get caught short in your budgeting and you're short in terms of cash. One of the things that I recommend, and I know it sounds crazy, is that you should have an emergency fund, and we're going to talk about that. But that doesn't mean you should be using your emergency fund. That emergency fund is there for the purposes of emergencies, but if you drain it and you are maxed out on your credit cards, you're going to get to the next level where you're going to need to talk to somebody like myself. So be very careful and aware of managing your credit utilization, because it is a super important factor in terms of your credit score. Hard pulls. Hard pull on your credit report versus a soft pull. If you are, again, in circumstances where you're unemployed or anticipating unemployment, applying for credit is probably not in your best interest, because you may be in a position where you applied for credit and then you're not going to be able to keep up with those payments. So if you're refinancing your house or you're refinancing your student loans and you're going to be out of work, do so only if that new amount is definitively within your budget. Because if you refinance it or you do anything that's a hard pull on your credit, a hard inquiry, then you will have a temporary damage to your credit, and that could make things more challenging in the future if you need additional credit. So applying for credit cards, applying for loans, those are all hard inquiries on your credit. A soft inquiry is one in which someone's just looking at the score, but you actually haven't applied for a loan. Those come up in different categories on your credit report, so they're not really that impactful. And if you're applying for a loan, it's not uncommon that one creditor will see that multiple creditors have looked at your credit. But again, this shouldn't be something that goes on a regular basis. Monitoring your credit report. Monitoring your credit report is the single most key factor in managing your credit and managing your debt. Know what's on your credit report. It's not easy, not difficult to understand, and not difficult to read. And if you take the time and do it, it'll be in your best interest. I usually recommend that is done on Halloween. Why? Because Halloween is a scary time and you might be afraid to look at your credit. So therefore, use Halloween as an opportunity to take a look at your credit. You might feel that anxiety in looking at your credit because you might be feeling and thinking that, oh, I don't even want to look at my credit. It's probably terrible. It's horrible. So I understand that. You know, when I graduated from law school, I had tons of debt. I had tons of law school debt. And I was recently married. I had a baby. I had a job, but it wasn't paying me that much money. And I had so much debt. And I remember anytime I was asked about my credit, I would be like, I can't even look at it. Don't even bother. I would go into a store and they would say, do you want a store credit card? And I would say, you're not going to approve me. And it was just such a horrible thing. And I felt like an ostrich where I just put my head in the sand and I had no interest in looking at my credit. And I really can understand why. So I empathize with those of you who are in challenging situations right now where you don't want to look at your credit. But you need to look at it. You need to take a look, pull the Band-Aid off, look at the wound and say, how am I going to clean this and what am I going to do? Let it be a source of empowerment for you versus a source of stress for you. The stressful part comes because you really aren't sure what to do with it. So, and you really aren't sure what questions to ask, and you're really not sure under your circumstances how you're going to fix this and how you're going to get out of the problem that you're in, and you're not necessarily seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. All of that negativity is crowding and surrounding this credit, looking at your credit. So if you can just put the negativity aside and take a look at it and say, okay, I know that this is not going to be a really pretty sight, but let me figure out how I can resolve the issues that I have and take them in small bites. If you have too many credit cards, close some of them. I know earlier I said not to, but if you have 10 store credit cards, you do not need 10 store credit cards under the circumstances. If you don't use credit cards and they're just sitting there, close them. Yes, your credit takes a very small hit, but that's not a big enough hit that should matter if you have 27 credit cards. And I have clients with 27 credit cards, so it happens. Sometimes you just get carried away with all those credit cards. Well, trim it down. You only need 1 to 2 store credit cards and 1 to 2 credit cards, and that's really it to manage your credit effectively. So take 1 step back and 2 steps forward and make that change. Take a look at your credit and monitor it. Right now, understand that you are able to get a free credit report through the end of the year. Annualcreditreport.com is offering weekly free credit reports until spring 2021. So weekly is maybe too much for you. We're all super busy. I have a credit monitoring service that I use personally for myself, and this way I am always aware of any time my credit is checked, what my score is on a regular basis, why my score has changed, and ways in which I can help myself. I personally pay for that, but there are a lot of ways that you could do credit monitoring yourself where you don't have to pay for it, and there's a lot of free services. So take a look into the free services and check your credit report for errors, anything that could be hurting. And honestly, since fraud and scams are so prevalent, especially during pandemics and other crises, it is the time that you need to be monitoring that. And if you have loved ones that are elderly or who have been sick and in the hospital, that is the time to have a discussion about monitoring credit, because very often that information can be lifted easily and you're not monitoring it when you're focusing on managing health and other issues. So even though you might be super busy and stressed out, this is something that I'm encouraging you to do. So avoiding unmanageable debt. So how do you avoid unmanageable debt? The biggest key to staying out of credit and debt while you're unemployed is to make and stick to a budget. If you had a budget before you were unemployed, you definitely want to reassess it. If you're going to be unemployed or your hours are getting cut or your income is compromised, that is an immediate call to action to check your budget. You need to make temporary adjustments, which may include cutting unnecessary expenses, and you need to be able to free up room in your budget to make sure that the necessities are paid. If you're relying on credit cards for everyday expenses and you're unemployed and you don't have an end in sight, or your unemployment is ending, that could potentially be problematic because you may have difficulty paying those credit cards. So you want to really take a look at what I call a crisis budget. A crisis budget is where you take a look at the absolute necessities that have to be paid. Your mortgage or your rent, your car, insurance, food, and gas for your car if you're traveling to work, and obviously the children's needs if you have children. So you definitely want to be able to take a look at a crisis budget, and then you can add into that budget as your income sees fit. So be aware of that so that you can avoid some unmanageable debt. Things are super expensive now. Like the supermarket is crazy. $50 goes nowhere. Even my kids who are all in college, where I put them on a budget for food, they call me up and they can't even for one person, eat food at $50 a week. So, and they're not in places like Manhattan where food is normally excessively expensive. They're in places where food would be seemingly more manageable, but it's actually not. So expenses have gone up. I've seen everybody's bills go up. I've seen water bills go up. I have seen everything go up. So even building supplies, if you need to purchase something at a home repair store, everything has gone up. So with that, your income may have gone down, or it's stabilized in the sense that it's not going up, but it's not changing. When expenses go up like that, that's why you have to reassess your budget on a regular basis and really look to see what's a necessity during this time and what simply is not. We've all seen what we can live with and what we can't, And that may be different. My needs are different than your needs, and there's no reason to be judgmental about that, and certainly never judge yourself. So be aware of that. Try to, like I said, avoid relying on credit card for everyday expenses. If you need to for now, it's okay. You need to. It's temporary, and you're going to have to do what you have to do to stay afloat. Just try to avoid overspending under the circumstances. Try making those minimum payments, like I said, and more when you can, but no, don't make more to the detriment of your savings account. So I know that sounds crazy, but under the circumstances, if your circumstances are tenable or they are questionable, then if you're paying down your debt, that's great, and I encourage you to pay down debt, but sometimes those priorities do change when your income is tenuous. So you might want to keep a little bit more cash in the bank, even though you're not necessarily paying down your credit cards. And again, that may seem counter to much of what you read about, but a lot of what you read about and what you hear about really is fact dependent. And what that means is you have to be able to apply it to your personal circumstances. So what's really happening to you and your household right now? So are you able to make these changes and manage the debt effectively? Only you really know that. So what works for somebody else doesn't necessarily work for you. If you're having trouble, you can certainly contact your creditors. If you're current, you're going to get more deference than you're going to if you're behind. And what I mean by that is, under the circumstances, many creditors have offered assistance due to the pandemic. When you are already behind, there's no additional assistance. And I can tell you firsthand that once you're behind, which is okay too, that the pandemic and having COVID, family members having COVID, deaths from COVID are absolutely and completely not hardships. So no creditor cares that you had COVID, and they don't care if you lost a family member. And I know that sounds cold, but that's the way it works in the collection world. Don't care. If you're current and you call up your creditor, yes, they want to keep you current. They want to try to keep you from falling behind. But if you've already fallen behind, that's a different ballgame. Contact your creditors, be honest with them. Don't agree to anything that you can't complete. Know your budget and before you're contacting them, so you know what you can do. And don't be afraid to say to your creditor, I need to think about this. Thank you for the information. I've taken notes. I will call you back. If they say to you something like, you have to call back by 4 o'clock or else, okay, or else. It is what it is. So if you don't have an answer and you can't make a decision by whatever their time frame is, that's okay. Don't feel the pressure. You have to do what's best for you. All right, with that said, this is all my contact information. And there is a lot more information that I certainly could have gone into today, but I do want to mention one thing that is super important. If you're having trouble even making the minimum payments and you've contacted your creditor and you've fallen behind, there are a lot of government assistance programs that are out there. The federal government has more than 1,000 benefit programs in times of need. You can contact the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, low-income home energy assistance programs, SNAP, which is supplemental nutrition assistance programs. You can seek out debt assistance through somebody like myself, but please be careful if you do. You want to be super savvy about this. You want to work with somebody who is located in your state and understands debt, doesn't charge monthly service fees or anything like that. If they are not an attorney, that they're licensed to do this, because you have to be licensed, certainly in the state of New York. An attorney is a good resource simply because there are tax, there are other issues that come along with it. So with that said, here's my contact information. I'm going to turn my video back on. This way you can see me again. And if anything I can answer, this is how to contact me. We put a lot of great information out on our social media. We're super active on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. So please follow us, and you'll get to see all the great things that we're up to and the tips that we have.
Thank you, Leslie. That was great. Thank you for sharing all of that information with us. We will open it up for Q&A now. So if anyone has a question, you can use the chat box, or you can also email info@savvyladies.org. And Leslie, the first question for you is saying, Experian advertises a credit score boost. Can you explain what that is? They say they can boost your score by 10 points.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Yes, 10 points, but yes, they have a program and they have a process called Experian Boost, and I did mention it earlier when we were talking about how to improve the credit. So with that said, it does help you. The idea of that particular program is to help improve your credit instantly, but honestly, 10 points is nothing. So you want to try to improve your credit score 20, 30, 60, 80, 100 points. So a good credit score is over 720, 740. So if you're at 680, it's not going to make much difference if you went to 690. If you're at 720 or 735 and you need to get to 740 to be in a different tier, then that makes a difference. Listen, every point does count, and the program is available, but and it's free, but the 10 points is just one piece of the puzzle. So consider using the other credit utilization, the credit payment methods that I'm suggesting to build your credit score better. In order to have good credit, you have to manage your debt. If you have a lot of debt, you're just never going to have a good credit score. So you're going to be in the 600s, even if you make your minimum payments. Your ideal credit score that you're striving for is over a 740. Yes, the best credit scores are over 800, and it does take time to get there. You can have debt and still have credit scores over 800, just so you know. But that's the comment on the Experian Boost.
Okay, thank you. Next question says, you talked about credit utilization for store credit cards. For regular credit cards, should you increase your available credit if you qualify? I'm having a little trouble understanding. Can you talk about the pros and cons of credit utilization?
Yes. Okay. So let's go back to the example. So let's say you have $1,000 available credit. If you're spending $200 on a regular credit card a month, and that's your budget and that's what you're spending, there really is no reason to be increasing your available credit. You just don't need it. If you find that you're spending $500 or $750, $800, $1,000 a month, and you're able to pay a substantial piece of that, then having a higher available credit will improve the credit utilization. So if you doubled that to $2,000 and you're still spending $500 or $800 a month, your credit utilization changes. So the difference between the $1,000 and you're spending $800, where you're at 80%, if you have a $2,000 available credit and you're spending $800, you're at 40%. So it actually will help your credit utilization score on your credit report if you have more available credit. But if you have a credit card with $25,000 available credit, or let's say $15,000, and you spend $1,000 a month, and your credit card company wants to give you another 10 and make it $25,000, is that really necessary? Are going to need available credit upwards of $25,000? If you're in a business, you might, because businesses do utilize credit where they have to put inventory and other things and they're spending those kind of numbers. But you as an individual person, if this is for your personal use, you need to understand what it is that you're spending each month. If the increase helps the credit utilization, then absolutely go for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks for explaining that.
Sure.
I have two questions asking if you can repeat some of the resources that you mentioned. So the first one is saying, can you say again the community resources that people who are having difficulty paying can access?
Yes, there's lots of community resources depending on what issue you're having. So the ones I mentioned were from the federal government, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which has grant programs to help with hospital bills and medical costs, if that's the issue. Low-income home energy, also called LIHEAP. The first one was HHS. The second one helps with heating and utility costs. SNAP, SNAP, Supplemental Nutrition Program, which helps struggling families to put food on the table. There are tons of programs available. There are programs through your local Chamber of Commerce, through your churches, through different charities. You can go to, if you're on Long Island, Nassau Suffolk Law Services can guide you. There are programs through the city. The city of New York is offering a number of different ones. You can contact your utility companies directly and ask them for assistance. So if you are having trouble struggling and you're having trouble paying your bills and you need a debt help resource, certainly I'm a debt help resource, but you can also find other debt help resources. If you cannot pay your bills at all and you have no income, you can't put food on the table, and you're in risk of losing your home, then the conversation may need to turn to bankruptcy. If it's temporary, bankruptcy may not be the right option. If you need a referral for something like that, you can contact me. I'm happy to give that to you. You can contact your local bar association in the county in which you live for pro bono assistance in different matters. You can also contact law schools. Very often have clinics to assist with legal services if you have a civil matter that you need assistance with and you absolutely have no money to employ an attorney. If you do and you have the budget but you are struggling and you're behind on your bills, then you're certainly welcome to contact me, and I'm happy to help you with that process. Did that answer all your questions as far as the programs, or do you need more?
I will see if we have a follow-up in the chat. I think that was very helpful, though, to list those. Thank you. If we do have a follow-up, I'll let you know. The next question was asking if you could repeat the website for checking your credit report.
Yeah, annualcreditreport.com. So annual, ANNUAL, credit, CREDIT, report, REPORT.com. That's an option. Credit Karma, so long as it's free, and that's a good resource as well. But annualcreditreport.com is offering the free credit reports weekly through 2021. Normally, you're entitled to a free credit report every year anyway. But the key is when you get your credit report, you want to make sure that you have it from all three bureaus. Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax are the three main bureaus that do credit reporting for consumers.
Okay, great. And we will make sure we list all of those in the follow-up email so everyone has access to those. The next question is regarding reported income. Does collecting unemployment count? Some of my credit cards have gone into collections. I'm getting settlement notices that I cannot pay now. Do I call them to get extensions or negotiate?
No, don't call to get extensions because they're not going to give it to you. Those are, they're going to credit, the way collection agencies work is that they want your money now. So they will not extend you 3 or 6 months out to start a credit. They're going to say to you, give us $5, give us $10, pay us now. And so that's not going to be helpful. So this is a little inside tip into the negotiation of debt. So yes, you're getting these letters. They have expiration dates on it. It's okay if it expires and you can't pay it. It's no big deal. Just don't pay it. But if you call up that creditor, they will pressure you. Collectors work on commission. They have required numbers that they have to meet, and they will put tremendous pressure on you to make some sort of a payment. They will get you to take money off another credit card to pay them. They want you to put you into a repayment program. They'll tell you things have expired. If you don't have the money, let it go. So what? It's in collections. It'll still be in collections next month. That won't change. The only thing that changes is that it continues to be reported on your credit that you're behind and in collections. When you speak to a creditor, if you're going to do this on your own and you're not going to seek assistance from somebody to help you with this, be very careful what you say. Anything you say can and will be used against you. They have to do something called skip tracing. Skip tracing is where they find out all of your background information, your employer, your home address, your cell phone number. Once you give them a cell phone number, they can call you anytime. So I try to only give out, my recommendation is to only give out a home phone number. They're going to ask you, can I have your cell phone number? And say, I only have a home phone number, unless you don't have a home phone number, and then it's a cell phone. But then they can call you anytime. They want to know where you work. They want to know everything about you. This way, you've already provided them with all the information that they would normally need to do to find you. This way, if you don't pay, they can go after you through another means. So be very careful the information that you give. My recommendation that is if you have the money to settle an account and you're going to do this on your own, that you call them up, be very tough, and say, this is what I'm prepared to do, and they may tell you no. And you may have to hang the phone up, and you might have to call back again a month later. The problem is that with collectors, once you call them, they don't stop calling. The only time they stop calling you is when I get involved. So, and I send an authorization saying you can't call my client like that. So they start harassing you. They'll call you all day. They'll call you every day. They'll send you messages, emails, and otherwise, and you feel tremendous pressure to pay them. So my point of all this is to warn you about the prospect of dealing with debt collectors and how challenging that can be and stressful it can be. If you feel you can manage resolving the debt with them and you've negotiated something and you're comfortable with it, do not give them the money before they give you a letter. Many of them will tell you that they won't do it unless you give them post-dated checks. Again, there's all these little things that they like to tell consumers that we don't do. We don't give post-dated checks. We do not do anything without something in writing to prove that this debt is actually being settled, because you can't necessarily trust the debt collector. On your end, your phone line is not being recorded. That debt collection agency could go out of business, and that's the end of that record, and you might have paid them, and then down the road, a year from now, you have no record of that. And that could be a problem. So I'm not telling you this with the idea to scare you. I'm telling you this because resolving debt is a complicated matter. It's not that easy. You need to be prepared to do so. Make sure you know what you can do. Don't feel pressure, and don't provide them everything under the sun. Do not let it all hang out when you have a conversation with your debt collector. If you need help, ask for it. It's totally okay to get help to resolve it, because remember, there's also a potential tax implication. You'll have a credit implication. You want to make sure things are updated properly by the creditor. No, they will not erase the credit history when you settle the debt. That doesn't work. You can't negotiate that. You can't threaten that you're going to file bankruptcy, because they really don't care. They'll just wait to see if you actually file. And again, using the fact that you had a hardship, if it's ongoing and you're unemployed permanently, let's say you were disabled, that's a different story from telling them that you had COVID or you lost your job because you were in the restaurant business and they realize that the restaurants are going to reopen soon, so they don't care. So those are my tips in dealing with debt collectors. I hope I answered that and didn't scare you, but don't worry about the letters that come in the mail from them when things expire. They want to be paid that month, and if it doesn't happen, you call back next month. You know what? Next month, you might actually get a better deal. You never know.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing all of that. Leslie, I think this is the final question, which is saying, I see commercials on TV that say I can get out of debt if I call them. Is this a scam?
I'm so happy you asked that. I'm so happy you made my day. So yes, you see commercials on TV. You hear things on the radio. You may get a letter from somebody that says you're about to be sued, or if you don't call us, you're going to have detrimental impact to your credit and your debt situation. And they may have your personal information. They may know your creditors. They may know your credit score. They may know your balances. They buy that information from the credit bureaus. That's why they have it. It's a solicitation. On TV, that is most of that is a call center. So when you call up, you're going to get one company. When the second person calls up, they get transferred to a different company. And the program that they're offering may not be exactly what they say they can get you out of debt. They may be offering you a loan, and they'll call you up and say, well, you don't qualify for this, but you qualify for a loan, and we can give you a loan and then pay off all your debts and give you this loan, and you might think that's a good idea. But those are solicitation companies. That's all they are. And a big box company that's out there isn't necessarily going to be able to assist you with your individual needs. Couple of things to be aware of. They anybody that charges money in terms of monthly service fees before any of your debts are resolved, they tell you that they can't always handle all of your creditors, that if you get sued, they will refer you to an attorney, or they will help you do it on your own because you can be sued in this process. Those are all red flags, whether they're licensed in the state that you work in. Note that many of these companies outsource a lot of the work. So just because the person you're speaking to is probably not the company that's going to be negotiating your debt or managing it for you. So those are all challenges. There are some tax issues. There's nobody there to help you with the tax issue. There's really nobody who's going to help you with the legal issue. And so be aware that, yes, you see it on TV and they have great commercials and, get out of debt now. And if you're struggling, call us. Many of them are call centers. And again, they will refer you to whatever service that's been hired by them. And you see it with attorneys too. You'll see if you have a mesothelioma, contact us today. But if you read the fine print, you'll see that there's multiple attorneys. It's a referral service. It's very similar in the debt business. Debt companies will pay this one service that's on TV to bring them leads. You calling in become a lead to them. You want to be working with somebody who really is going to take your personal circumstances very seriously and make sure that you are protected. And you're probably not going to get that from a very large company. That doesn't mean that they're all bad. I'm not discounting reliable services that are out there, and there are very good services that are out there, but I'm just suggesting that you be aware of the type of service that you reach out to and who reaches out to you.
Yes. Leslie, do you have time for 2 more quick questions that
Sure.
just came in?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, great. Thank you. This next one says, I've had trouble in the past accessing my credit reports because they can't establish my identity over the phone or online. It might have something to do with my not having had enough kinds of debt. I have credit cards that I pay in full, but not a mortgage or school loans. Do you have any suggestions for me?
Yeah, that's not why they can't assess your credit report. That's just because you don't have a mortgage or student loan debt. They should still be able to access your credit report. The question I would have is, why can't they access it? Has it been compromised in any way? So sometimes you might want to ask, is there a credit freeze put on it by some strange thing? Is there a fraud alert that's on there? Why is it that you can't access it, or I can't access it, even if I request it? So I would call the bureaus directly. I would call Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, and talk to them about what's on your credit report. They are going to ask you questions, and when you try to access your credit report online, they ask you very specific questions about your credit history, like did you ever live at one of these addresses? Did you ever have a credit card from one of these companies? And you'd have to check off the right one. If you check off the wrong one, then your access can be limited or frozen. So you definitely want to get to the bottom of why you can't access your credit report. So I would call the bureaus directly and have a conversation. But it's not because you don't have a mortgage or because you don't have student loans.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And last question is asking if you can recommend a trusted debt consolidation agency.
Okay, well, I'd have to tout myself here. So that we do debt resolution and debt consolidation. So debt consolidation is a very broad term. Let me explain the differences. Debt consolidation includes debt settlement. It includes credit counseling. It includes loans. If you're looking for a loan under the guise of a debt consolidation, then if you have good credit, then you can shop that loan and you might be able to find a personal loan that with a low interest rate to pay off your debts if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for a service that's going to help you negotiate your debt with your creditors, then I have to say me. I feel like I have to say it's me. So that's what I do. That's what we do at my firm. All our consultations are free. So if it's not me and you look for another firm, then my recommendation is that you should be talking to somebody who will talk to you for free, who will ask you really good questions and doesn't charge you for that consultation, and that everything is explained to you and you understand everything up front and all the risks. But again, because it's what I do, I would recommend that you call us. If you want to call us and call into my office, you could do so. Ask for AZFAR, AZFAR. And if there's a resource that's out there that makes better sense than working with us, I will be happy to send you. So if it turns out it's a loan, if it turns out it's a bankruptcy, if it turns out it's a different kind of service that you're looking for, I'm happy to refer that out. And please know I don't get paid for referring people out. So I have no interest in the services that I refer people out to other than making sure that you get the best possible help. Because again, this is impacting your credit and you want to make sure this is done right the first time. You can check us out on our website at taynelaw.com. You can see who we are and what we do. But again, and if you want to call in and you want me to give you some other resources to check around, I'm happy to do that. I have no problem with that.
Okay. Thank you, Leslie. And we will share Leslie's contact information in our follow-up email. We'll also list the resources that Leslie mentioned throughout the presentation. And so I want to thank you, Leslie, for a really excellent presentation. And I am seeing some messages of people that asked questions earlier saying thank you for all the help that you gave. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. I love talking about this topic. As you can tell, I'm super passionate about credit and debt. I know it brings most people down, but I love it. And I'm available. Even if you just have one-off questions and you want to reach out to me, you can always go to info@TayneLaw, or my email is ltayne@TayneLaw. You can Instagram, Facebook us, whatever it is, whatever questions that you have that are follow-up that maybe you didn't feel comfortable asking, or you finished the program and you're like, I forgot to ask the question, then you're welcome to to do that as well.
Great. Thank you so much for that offer. We'll send it out over email. And thank you also for just providing some, positive information that will make it through this. I think this is what we all need to hear during these times.
Yeah. We will get through this. We're going to get through this. We're going to make it through. We're going to survive and thrive, and we're going to be better off for it. And it's been a very challenging time, and I am an empath, so I feel for everybody, and I understand. My daughter is just recovering from COVID right now, who had it very badly at school. So I have been impacted, in a lot of different ways too, so I'm not insensitive to what's going on. And I really try to remain optimistic and positive, and the more positiveness that we put out there, hopefully this all turns around.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you so much, Leslie, and I want to thank everyone for joining us. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.